We're going to continue with our study in Judges tonight. Judges, end of chapter 8. The last time that we met, we talked about how Gideon freed Israel from the Midianite army. And now we've ended there at chapter 8, verse 28, where it says that Midian was subdued and the land had rest 40 years in the days of Gideon. So while he was alive, they had those 40 years after he did that. And now we're ready to pick up in verse 29 and read the next part of the story. So go there. Judges chapter 8, verse 29. Jerubbaal, which you'll remember, is Gideon's name. He had it changed. He contends with Baal. The son of Joash went and lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he called his name Abimelech. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of Joash his father. As soon as Gideon died, verse 33, the people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals, and made Baal-berith their god. And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hand of all their enemies on every side. And they did not show steadfast love to the family of Gideon in return for all the good that he had done to Israel. So, once the Midianite threat was dealt with, Gideon went and lived in his own house. He refused to be a king, but he was still he was still a judge, and he was still very powerful, as you'll see, because once he died, people stopped following Yahweh. So he had to have had some kind of power while he was alive. And we read here that he had a whole bunch of wives, so many that he was able to have 70 sons by them. These were his heirs, and they were considered his legitimate heirs. They would have traced their family history through him. That is said, so-and-so, the son of Gideon, the son of Joash, and so on. But he also had a concubine, at least one concubine, and through her he had at least one son. We're only going to talk about that one because he plays a major part in the next chapter. But this son, because he was the son of a concubine, he couldn't trace his lineage through Gideon the same way the brothers could. He was more focused on his mother's side of the family. And he wasn't considered an heir. You remember with Abraham there was Hagar and Ishmael, and Sarah said that boy's not going to have any part in the inheritance, so send her away. And so he did. He sent them both off. Well, that was because it was the son of a concubine. He's not considered an heir like a son is. And so this is who Abimelech was. He couldn't expect to receive the inheritance the same way those other 70 brothers could. And one of the things that Gideon passed on, apparently, was his power. The people were going to look to those boys to pick up where their dad left off. But they weren't going to look to Abimelech for that. So you can probably guess that there's some tension there. There's a little bit of sibling rivalry. And you can probably see where it's going. But for now, we're just reading about the end of Gideon's life. And that is that he went home and he enjoyed his life at home for about 40 years, and then he died. And then, of course, as soon as that happened, Israel went right back to idolatry and the next phase of the cycle the judges cycle, where they have peace, and then that leads to them not caring, and they fall into sin until God hands them over to someone, and then they cry out to him eventually, and then he sets them free, and then they live in peace for a while until they start sinning again. So that's where they're going, right back into the next cycle. But we're not jumping into the next judge immediately. We're going to talk about something significant that happened before that. The name Baal-berith means Lord of the Covenant. And whatever that covenant was, it wasn't the covenant that Yahweh had with them. So when Gideon died and Israel began to whore themselves out to the Baals, to Baal-berith, it was spiritual adultery. They were breaking the covenant. And so they've got lots of problems coming up. But it's not just that. Here we also read that they forgot all about Gideon's family. They didn't show them any love. They didn't care about them. And that made the way for this Abimelech to come up and try to seize power. Okay? I want you to think about tonight, as I read this, think about it almost like an episode of a TV show. There's so much story here. And it would make a great television show. There's a lot of violence and a lot of political maneuvering and a lot of stuff going on. So think about it like that, because I think it makes it more interesting, but then we can also capture the idea of what's happening. Okay, so you got this man. He wants to be the leader, but there are 70 people in front of him. How's he going to deal with that? How's he going to take control? That's what we find in chapter 9. Judges chapter 9, verse 1. Now Abimelech, Gideon's son, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem to his mother's relatives and said to them and to the whole clan of his mother's family, "Say in the ears of all the leaders, which is better for you? That all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal rule over you? Or that one rule over you?" So go tell the leaders here in our hometown, what's better? Those 70 or just one? Don't forget that I'm also your flesh and blood. I am your bone and your flesh. So his mother's relatives spoke all these words on his behalf in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem. And their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, "He is our brother." The family went out and they said, "Sure, let's try to push this thing and see what happens." And they start telling the leaders, and the leaders say, "Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. He's a family. He's part of our family." And they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal-berith, from that temple of their god, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless fellows who followed him. And he went to his father's house, to Gideon's house at Ophrah, and killed his brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 men on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. And all the leaders of Shechem came together, and all Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king by the oak of the pillar. So, the people of Shechem wanted a family member to rule. They thought that's going to be better than having all these other people, Gideon's own sons. And they'd forgotten about Gideon. They didn't have any concern for his family. And so Abimelech took advantage of that, and he used his family to give him some support, to whisper it into the ears of the leaders, and they agreed. And they decided they're going to make him king. So they gave him some money. Okay, I tried to figure out how much that is. It's hard to tell. It looks like it's only like $400 in today's dollars, but that can't be right. These were mercenaries who got some money, is basically what it was. And they are worthless and reckless, is how it puts it. So in other words, here's this guy who wants to be king, and he finds a bunch of people he can pay off, and they don't care what they have to do to get it. All they care about is getting the money. And so he pays them, and he says, "All right, you follow me and you do what I say." And they do. They follow him over to Gideon's house, and there are all these men, these brothers. So how many men was it? It must have been at least 70, right? They get over there and put all of them to the sword at the same time. It says they killed all 70 of them on one stone. And so, now that the competition's been wiped out, there's no one left to kill. Who's next in line but Abimelech? And so they make him king. It says that they came together and made him king by the oak of the pillar. So they went to this formal ceremony. The oak, that was considered like a sacred place. Gideon had one, and Deborah was under a palm tree and all that. So these were sacred places, and they said, "We're going to meet over here, and when we do, it's going to be official." And by the way, if you get confused here and you say, "Well, but I thought Saul was the first king." Saul was the first king of Israel, the United Kingdom. This is a city, maybe a region, but it's not Israel. So he's the king there. They wanted Gideon to take it, but Gideon refused. He said, "Oh no, Yahweh is going to be your king." Well, they really, really want one. So Abimelech comes up and he says, "Well, I'll do it." And they give him what he needs, and then they swear him in. But the thing is here, when they killed all of those sons, they didn't realize that one of them escaped. The youngest son, Jotham, made it away. In verse 7, when it was told to him, when he knew all that had happened, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim, which is the same place that Moses had the Israelites stand. You remember they stood on Mount Gerizim, and then another group stood on Mount Ebal, and the Gerizim group shouted out all the blessings of the law, and then the other group shouted out all the curses of the law. Well, Jotham goes on top of that first mountain, Mount Gerizim, and cried aloud and said to them, "Listen to me, you leaders of Shechem, that God may listen to you. The trees," he tells them this fable, "the trees once went out to anoint a king over them. And they said to the olive tree, 'Reign over us.' But the olive tree said to them, 'Shall I leave my abundance by which gods and men are honored and go hold sway over the trees?' And so the trees said to the fig tree, 'You come and reign over us.' But the fig tree said to them, 'Shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit and go hold sway over the trees?' So the trees said to the vine, the grapevine, 'You come and reign over us.' But the vine said, 'Shall I leave my wine that cheers men and God and go hold sway over the trees?' Then all the trees said to the bramble, 'You come and reign over us.' And the bramble said to the trees, 'If in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon.'" So, Jotham hears about what happened with his brothers. And he finds a place. I picture it's probably a crag or something on the side of the mountain where they can't see him, but they can hear him. And he gets close enough to the city, right, of Shechem. And he starts to holler. Once he gets their attention, he tells them this story right before he makes his escape. He flees right after. The story that he tells him is kind of a strange story, isn't it, about the trees looking for a king. They ask an olive tree, they ask a fig tree, and they ask a grapevine. They say, we want you to be our king. And all three of them refused. And they all refused because they were already doing something valuable for the gods and for men. The olives, I make olives. I'm important, and let's see, what did he say? The olive tree said, "Shall I leave my abundance by which gods and men are honored?" So, it makes you think about how they anointed someone with oil, the priests of the king or whatever, put oil on their heads. Well, I have this. This is what I do, so what I do is valuable. And so the fig tree, they said, "No, I've got sweet fruit. I help people live. I give them something to eat." And all right, well, how about the grapevine? "No, I make the grapes that make the wine. God is honored by that wine. We pour out sacrifices to him. Men are able to drink that wine. It gives them cheer." And so all of these are too important. They are already doing things that are too important. They can't come and be the king. But then the bramble is asked, "Please come and be our king." And you know that you're running out of options when it comes to that, right? Because what is a bramble? Well, it's a thorn bush. It doesn't have anything. It has thorns, but you can't build anything with it. It doesn't produce anything. It's not like olives and figs and grapes or anything. It's a useless shrub is what it is. And so they ask this bramble because they really want a king. And that's basically where Israel is, right? They want a king so badly, even though they have Yahweh, that they'll take someone like Abimelech. They'll take whoever they can get. And so in the story, getting ahead of ourselves here, in the story, the bramble is willing, but not without a condition. The condition is that if there is any treachery here, if you're doing this and there's any treachery, so if you turn on me or if you're lying to me about anything, then you're all going to burn, is basically what it is. So it's kind of a threat, really. Well, they hear this story, and maybe they don't know exactly what it means, but Jotham doesn't let them try to interpret it on their own. He gives them the meaning. He explains it to them. Verse 16. Now therefore, okay, so you've heard my story. Now therefore, if you acted in good faith and integrity when you made Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as his deeds deserved, and then here we have this parenthetical statement, did he get what he deserved from you? Well, let's think about what he did. He fought for you and risked his life and delivered you from the hand of Midian. And you did it at this stone, right? So it's kind of like an official act of what you call justice. You have risen up against my father's house this day and have killed his sons, 70 men on one stone. And you have made Abimelech, the son of his female servant, king over the leaders of Shechem, because he is your relative. So if you have acted in good faith and integrity with Jerubbaal and with his house this day, you know what? You can rejoice in Abimelech. If what you've done is right, rejoice, because you've got a good thing. And let him also rejoice in you. But if not, and you know it's not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come out from the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. And then he ran away and fled and went to Beer and lived there because of Abimelech his brother. So the arrangement between the thorn bush, between the bramble and the trees, symbolizes the relationship between Abimelech and these leaders in this town, the Shechemites. They didn't have anything to worry about as long as they acted in integrity. As long as they acted in good faith, they were okay. They could come and take refuge in their new king's shade. The problem was that he was a worthless bramble. He was as worthless as a thorn bush. And it wasn't going to take very long, 3 years, before they figured that out and turned on him. The bigger problem was that they had not dealt with Gideon's sons faithfully, had they? If they were delivering justice, if Gideon's 70 sons had done something to deserve it, and they go out there and they put them on the stone and execute them, well, that's justice. But that's not what they did. They did this because they wanted Abimelech to cut in line. It didn't have anything to do with integrity, and they knew it. So fire would come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. That's the point of his story. If you've done right, you got nothing to worry about. But if you haven't done right, if you've done wrong, well, it's just like this story. Your relationship is these trees begging for a king, taking whatever they can get, and it turns out to be useless. And in the end, it backfires and burns the whole forest down. That is where you're headed. So, fast forward 3 years. Verse 22, Judges 9:22. Abimelech ruled over Israel 3 years. And God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem. And the leaders of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, that the violence done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come, and their blood be laid on Abimelech their brother, who killed them, and on the men of Shechem who strengthened his hands to kill his brothers. And the leaders of Shechem put men in ambush against him on the mountaintops, and they robbed all who passed by along that way. And it was told to Abimelech. So the Shechemites eventually realized who Abimelech was, and they wanted him gone. So their plan was, look, let's have an ambush. We'll have some men hide out, and when he passes by that way, then we'll take him and we'll kill him. And it really wasn't a very good plan, because they didn't just attack him, they attacked everybody who came by. And so they kind of gave themselves away, and then Abimelech heard about it. Of course, he can't let that stand. But the interesting part of all of this is that it was attributed to God. It says he sent an evil spirit between them. And why did he do that? Well, he says, because that verse 24, the violence done to Gideon's son, when they went over there and they killed all those men, he put this evil spirit there that their blood would be laid on Abimelech and on the men who gave Abimelech strength. This is purely an act of justice. He says, vengeance is mine. Well, that's what this is. He's going to return upon them what they had done to Gideon's family. Basically, he intended to give them what they deserved, so their deal would fall apart. And I imagine probably what that means is that he made their hearts hard against each other. When they started to hate each other, that was God's doing. He was making that happen so that they couldn't keep this deal going. It was going to fall apart. And all this new chaos. Okay, so here we are. We're picturing the story with all the characters. You've got these 70 sons. They're going to be the heirs of Gideon's fortune. And then you have this one who says, no, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm going to have it. So he convinces this group of people to join with him. He gives them some money. They go over there and they kill all the people. But they missed one. So he gives that prophecy. And 3 years go by. What's going to happen? I mean, we've made it 3 years. Things are slowly starting to fall apart. And one day, we come across this new guy. Okay, the time is right for someone else to come up and try to be king. And his name is Gael, verse 26. And Gael, the son of Ebed, moved into Shechem with his relatives. And the leaders of Shechem put confidence in him. And they went out into the field and gathered the grapes from their vineyards and trod them and held a festival. And they went into the house of their God and ate and drank and reviled Abimelech. And Gael, the son of Ebed, said, who is Abimelech, and who are we of Shechem that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Gideon of Jerubbaal? And is not Zebul his officer? That's another main character that's going to come up. Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem. But why should we serve him? Now, in other words, serve the true son. Serve the people who actually belong here. Why should we follow Abimelech? He's an outsider. Oh, how I would that this people were under my hand. Then I would remove Abimelech. I would say to him, increase your army and come out. So everyone was so unhappy with Abimelech. And Gael realizes that, and he has this opportunity to usurp his throne and become king himself. And the same people who put Abimelech in charge, same ones who met with him under the oak tree, are the same ones here who are now interested in deposing Abimelech and setting up Gael as their king. And so it says they put confidence in him. And then they have this big party. They say, hey, gather all the grapes that we can find. Let's pull them all together. We're going to drink and be merry tonight because we have a better prospect for the future. And so Gael goes, and that night, so far, it's just been the leaders who know what's going on, his own family and the leaders. But now that everybody's here, he wants to announce it in public. And so he says it out loud. Oh, if only these people were under my hand. If only you would elect me, if you would anoint me as your king, I'd take care of this Abimelech problem for you. He's the one you don't like, right? You want him gone? I'm someone who's willing to help you take care of that. And so you should make me be your king. And really there's a benefit here for you, because who is Abimelech? He doesn't live here. His father lives over there, and he lives over there. He's nobody to us, but you know me, I'm a hometown guy. My family lives here. You know who I am. I'm your own kin. So what you really need is the true son of this city. And I am just the guy who can do it. And if you'll support me, I'll take care of Abimelech. And you can picture how that looked. Everybody's sitting there with their drinks, and they're all excited, and they start cheering and raising their glasses, and they're drinking, they're happy. We're finally going to get out from under this problem. But not everyone was so happy. There was at least one man in the audience who didn't like what he heard. Look at verse 30. When Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed, his anger was kindled. And he sent messengers to Abimelech secretly, saying, Behold, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his relatives have come to Shechem, and they are stirring up the city against you. Now therefore, go by night, you and the people who are with you, and set an ambush in the field. Then in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, rise early and rush upon the city. And when he and the people who are with him come out against you, you may do to them as your hand finds to do. So Abimelech and all the men who were with him rose up by night and set an ambush against Shechem in four companies. And Gaal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood in the entrance of the gate of the city. And Abimelech and the people who were with him rose from the ambush. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, Look, people are coming down from the mountaintops. And Zebul said, You mistake the shadow of the mountains for men. Gaal spoke again and said, Look, people are coming down from the center of the land, and one company is coming from the direction of the viner's oak. Then Zebul said to him, Where is your mouth now? You who said, Who is Abimelech that we should serve him? Are not these the people whom you despised? Go out now and fight with them. And Gaal went out at the head of the leaders of Shechem and fought with Abimelech. And Abimelech chased him, and he fled before him, and many fell wounded up to the entrance of the gate. And Abimelech lived in Arumah, and Zebul drove out Gaal and his relatives so that they could not dwell at Shechem. So, his big mistake, Gaal's downfall, was letting this man Zebul hear his plan. See, Zebul was, I guess you could say, the main ruler of the city. He's kind of like a mayor, like a governor. He was an appointed official by Abimelech. So he was Abimelech's man. He was Abimelech's officer, is the way it describes him. So it really wasn't in his best interest to see his boss brought down. And he had a personal interest, he had a vested interest in making sure that he stayed in power. And so when he heard Gaal say what he said, he secretly delivered a message to Abimelech. And he gave him an idea for a plan. Here's what you should do. And Abimelech got the message, and so he thought that was a good idea. So he showed up early the next morning. And I suppose, we don't get all the details, but the way I picture it, you've got this city with walls around it, and you've got this mountain and this big open field out in front, and these men start coming down, and the watchmen are watching. They're looking. I mean, they don't have their guards down. They know that they are getting ready for a time of war, and so they're watching out there. And one says, "It looks like something's moving out there. You better go get Gaal and let him see." And so he goes over there and he's looking, but it's still early morning, not much light. And so while he's watching out there, he says, "You know what? I think you're right. I think it sure looks like people are coming down the mountain." And so he goes to the leader of the city, Zebul. He doesn't know that Zebul has told Abimelech what's going on. He doesn't know Zebul is going to stall. So he says, "Look, I think there are people coming." And Zebul goes out there and he looks and he says, "I don't know what you're talking about. I think your eyes are playing tricks on you. You're seeing the shadows of the mountain and you're mistaking them for men." But he knows that it is people. So he goes back in, and Gaal's standing there at the gate, and he's sure that I think it might be someone. So he keeps watching, and as the sun comes up, there's a little bit more light. Now he knows. It's beyond a shadow of a doubt. He knows that is not shadows. My mind isn't playing tricks. Somebody is coming. And so he runs back to Zebul and he says, "Hey, this time I know there are people coming." Zebul knows that he can't stall him anymore, and so guess what he says to him? Where's your mouth now? Now, it's not necessarily confessing, I told Abimelech, but he is telling him, look, you did all that talking last night. Time to put some feet to it. Walk a little. You said you were going to deliver everybody from Abimelech, so go do it. The people you despise, they're right here. They're outside the gates. You said you were going to tell him to increase his army, and then you were going to fight him. Well, he's here, and he's got his army. So, Gael gathers his men, and they rush out, and they go to battle, but it doesn't go like they thought it would. It doesn't say Gael died. It says that they got pushed back to the gates. Many fell wounded up to the entrance of the gate. And Zebul drove out Gael and his relatives so that they could not dwell at Shechem. So he lost some men, he lost the battle for sure. And then, at the very least, he and his family were exiled from the city. So the plan totally backfired. He went from having something to having nothing. And Abimelech could have stopped there. He did what he came to do. He stopped the threat to his rulership. But I think he probably wanted to make a point. Like most men who want to be king, he was ambitious, and that meant he couldn't necessarily show mercy. And so he took up residence. It says he lived, and Abimelech lived at Arumah. So he took up residence in a nearby town. And then verse 42, on the following day, the people of Shechem went out into the field. So he's dealt with the rebel Gael. But now he wants to deal with everybody else, the citizens and the leaders. So the citizens, the people who may or may not have had anything to do with it, go out to the field. And Abimelech was told. He took his people, his soldiers, and he divided them into 3 companies and set an ambush in the fields. And he looked and saw the people coming out of the city. So he rose against them and killed them. Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city, while the 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the field and killed them. And Abimelech fought against the city all that day. He captured it and killed the people who were in it. And he razed the city and sowed it with salt. When all the leaders of the tower of Shechem heard of it, they entered the stronghold of the house of El-Berith. That's the temple of their god. Abimelech was told that all the leaders of the town, or of the tower of Shechem, were gathered together. And he went up to Mount Zalmon, he and all the people who were with him. And he took an axe in his hand and cut down a bundle of brushwood and took it and laid it on his shoulder. And he told the men who were with him, "What you've seen me do, hurry and do as I've done." So every one of the people cut down his bundle and followed Abimelech, put it against the stronghold, and they set the stronghold on fire over them. And all the people of the tower of Shechem also died, about 1,000 men and women. So the citizens went outside the city the day after the battle. They left through the gate. Maybe they wanted to tend to their wounded. Maybe they wanted to collect their dead. Maybe they just wanted to work. Got to get back into the fields. Whatever it was, it sure looks like they thought the battle was over, didn't they? Hey, Abimelech he couldn't let Gael do what he was doing, so he came over here and he squashed that, but now he's gone. And so we're going back to our lives as normal. And they really had no reason to be afraid. But Gael wasn't the only one that Abimelech wanted to kill. He wanted to make an example of the entire city. So he caught him outside, he caught him unaware, and he butchered him. And even that wasn't enough, was it? After he killed all the people, he razed the city. So he burned everything down, he tore everything up, and then he sowed salt all in their fields. That way you can't grow anything here anymore. Shechem has become a worthless place. Well, the leaders realized, when they realized that this happened, they realized they were also still in trouble. He's not going to stop at stopping Gael he's going to destroy the city and everybody in it, and we're the only thing left that remains in his objective. And so they escape to this stronghold, a tower, or something, a place where they could hide away from him. He couldn't get to him. Well, when he heard about it, he didn't try to attack him. He didn't try to talk him out. He didn't make him any promises. He said, hey, do what I do. He goes and he cuts kindling and brush and stuff, and he goes and he starts piling it up at the base of the tower, and they light it and they set it on fire, and everyone died. 1,000 men and women died as the bramble burned the oaks of Lebanon to the ground. Exactly what Jotham said was going to happen is what happened. And I suppose that after that, Abimelech felt pretty secure. I mean, he killed all the competition, he killed all the rebels, but God wasn't done with him. Because the prophecy wasn't just that, the purpose of it wasn't just that the people of Shechem would be destroyed, but he would also be destroyed. They had just been held accountable. So he used Abimelech to judge them, and now he needed to judge Abimelech. So, verse 50, then Abimelech went to Thebes and encamped against it and captured it. But there was a strong tower within the city, and all the men and women and all the leaders of the city fled to it and shut themselves in, and they went up on the roof of the tower. And Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it, and drew near to the door of the tower to burn it with fire. He was going to do the same thing to them as he did to the other town. And a certain woman threw an upper millstone on his head and crushed his skull. Then he called quickly to the young man, his armor-bearer, and said to him, draw your sword and kill me, lest they say of me, a woman killed him. And this young man thrust him through, and he died. And the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead. Everyone departed to his home. Thus, God returned the evil of Abimelech, which he committed against his father in killing his 70 brothers. And God also made the evil of the men of Shechem return on their heads. And upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. So there you have it. That's